Climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Right along here with Ransom Godwin tonight. I do thank you for joining. It's been an amazing week. Have you seen the changes? It becomes so more apparent. And, I'm looking at it as awakening comes by the second now. It's so out there in the open that, people I never thought in my wildest dreams ever are coming to the realization that there's something very, very, very wrong. And now what John Kerry said, we need to cut the American food supply. And then, they're now trying to demonize nitrogen, which, by the way, is 78% of our atmosphere, into a boogeyman of some sort where nitrogen is a predominant amount of the atmosphere. But now they're trying to say, it's in pelletized form. It's in your fertilizer. You can't have nitrogen. Well, dude, 78% of what's around you is nitrogen. So sorry, that doesn't work. And they want to cut the food supply now. So I think that was the last thing that took it too far, where even just the average person is going, whoa. You're going to shut down American food production and confiscate farms in America because of what? Nitrogen? Huh? What? Nah, cat's out of the bag that it's definitely non-human something controlling. It's a crazy world. Snake's been eating our eggs here at the farm, which is irking me because we got the king snakes, the black snake, the rat snakes out, and it's really dry here in East Tennessee. So they're looking for water, which is always watered down by the chickens. But B, they're like, hey, there's water and there's food, there's eggs. So we're setting out all these minnow traps right now, trying to put eggs in minnow traps to catch snakes. And then go release them somewhere else because we can't have them coming back. So kind of a weird week I'm having. Plus, I'm building the barn. We're finally getting the shelves up, and you got to add rock to the bottom shelf and add in, crusher. And it's been a hectic week. But Ransom, I'm glad you're joining me. Since the beginning of last Friday, I've just been on the run 24/7. And I'm so happy we're here tonight because you know what? Talking to you and everybody out here, thank you for joining us live wherever you are while we're streaming across all these different platforms from YouTube to Rumble to Twitter and everywhere else in between. I get a chance to relax here and just truly take a moment to reflect on thoughts, which I have a few tonight. So anyway, Ransom, glad you joined me, and it's going to be a good program. I think the Treasury's at it again, adding $1 trillion, so something's up.
Well, I skipped the news all week because I was concentrating on my house and trying to get all kinds of food growing and everything. And it's just, it's funny. This year is kind of a year of turmoil, I think, just based on the week that I ignored the news. So all this week we've been having really weird weather right on top of where I'm at. And, I'm looking at the weather map and all of the data on there, and it's totally off. So I'm outside looking at tremendous big lightnings. I'm looking at, this wind that's trying to knock my trailer over. It's ripping my carport off. It's beating my corn flat to the ground. And then the following day, we get this massive hailstorm with quarter-size hail just pounding everything away. And then again, the next day, another little monsoon thunderstorm comes up and blows my corn the other direction. And, I'm thinking, wow, man, I just imagine depending on crops to survive and just looking at the damage, just day by day, it's like a little catastrophe, a little trauma for, I don't know, hundreds of plants or whatever. And then I'm just thinking, so I get back on to the internet, and I was working on everything and cleaning my computer up so I connect it, and I'm looking at, I see they're charging Trump with 7 felonies. So right away, I'm just like, oh, well, something big's going on. Or they wouldn't give us this made-for-TV drama action that's been going on. So I've been looking through there. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. And I was looking through Twitter, and I saw this big giant storm of I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of lightning strikes in Australia that just blew the record away. It's like things are really charging up, and just looking through everything, I can tell that something big is in the works right now. And I think what it is they're about to set off the balkanization of Europe, and they're ready to kick that off. And I'm sure you saw that dam go up. And how many stories come up that keep endangering the nuclear plants in the Ukraine? It's like one after the other, right? It's like they put it so much in the psyche of the public. Anybody that pays attention to ongoings, happenings that are going on, and the news headlines, you keep seeing that reactors and Ukraine in danger from this or from that. And now they just, obliterated that dam and let all that water out, and then try to blame it on Russia. Like, why would Russia destroy one of their own key infrastructure things? I mean, it's pretty obvious what's going on there. They're trying to destabilize that permanently, that whole area, for decades and decades. And it makes you wonder, why do they have such a drive to destroy the Western world so much so fast? And I think it's this, total reset of financial systems, the way that people eat, how they live their daily lives. They're really throwing it on, and it's going exponential. And I don't know if you saw this, kind of an anecdotal thing, and I know the show that's on Revolution Radio before us was kind of talking about something similar, but they got this story from Las Vegas. It's kind of a funny story. So some cops are pulling people over, and on their dash cam, they see this huge green meteorite coming down, is what I think it is. That's what it looks like to me. It's big, glowing green thing comes down. And right when it lands, some people call 911 and they say, hey, this big bright light landed in our backyard, and there's these 8 to 10 foot creatures staring at us in the yard. They're still here. Like, what do we do? And they're like, say what? And he was saying, I know it's hard to believe, but what we're saying is there's 10 foot creatures just standing next to this bright light thing in our yard. So it could be made up, could be a hoax, but, isn't that bizarre? And then how friendly the media has finally gotten with the idea that, any second, this alien thing. So it almost seems like they have a whole domino effect line of events. And what they're doing right now in a major way is seeding all of the fears, anxieties, and ideas of their playbook to come. And one of the key parts of that is something that everybody's going to deal with. It doesn't matter which, conspiracy you delve into to find out what's going on. Is it chemtrails? Is it aliens? Is it this or is it that? It doesn't matter if you can't eat. And that's the main one that we talk about all the time. All of these events that they have are just, garbage food for the masses, so that they're constantly distracted with things that could be, might be, maybe, and then on top of that, a bunch of on-purpose lies, propaganda, and some other stuff mixed in there, so no one ever knows what's going on. And then here in the United States, they have everybody on the super tribalism trip, where they've made sure that you had to have picked a side in the political spectrum if you believe this or you believe this about a certain subject. Meanwhile, they keep working together in the uniparty, passing bills, legislation that keeps giving them ever more power and giving away the sovereignty and powers of each country, i.e. especially the United States, but because that matters to us only because we live here. But for other people in the Western world, they're doing the exact same program there. And it's kind of mind blowing taking a break from looking at it and then coming back and seeing the absolute level of craziness that they're putting on the population of the world. And at the same time, killing us softly.
I believe that was a song from the 1970s, reached number 1 on the charts for 4 weeks in a row. Anyway, I've had the same exact experience because we'd done most of the barn that we were building. So it's 32 feet long and 16 feet in depth. Put the roof on, got everything strapped in, and we needed to wrap a bunch and then put the back wall shelves in. So everything's a custom build, whatever we want. So we're trying to think about, all right, we got all these barrels, these snap barrels, 55-gallon drums, and they're full of seed and fertilizer, and, trying to, where do you put like 2,000 pounds of fertilizer? We got all the NPK, because the back 5 acres we're trying to turn into we're doing buckwheat, because you get a double rotation crop. You can, if you take it down on the first crop before it goes to seed, it'll come back for a second crop and then seed again. But, we're talking about massive amounts of premium hay to bring up for that. And we got our own animals, plus, people trading off for different things. We're out here in the countryside, and it is way beyond cash now. If anybody hasn't gotten the message, countryside has already kind of transitioned into cash will work, but other things, everybody's willing to trade anything for any value of something now that you need between, food growing, animals themselves, tools, any kind of implements, machinery, labor. That they'll trade anything. It's becoming a bargaining economy in real time out here. So have a premium crop of buckwheat hay coming in 5 acres. So we got a bunch of seed, fertilizer to grow that up. I've kind of stepped off the whole news train myself because, we got geese now, so to try to take care of them, and we got I got turkeys now as well, along with the geese. And anybody out there that's looking for prices, poultry prices or whatnot, even a goose or a geese chick is like $30 now. They used to be $5. For those of you who didn't know, they used to be about $5 to $7, $7.99, somewhere $8.99. It was a kind of an expensive one, like a Pyrenees, African Pyrenees kind would be, specialty breed, like $7, $8. And you're like, wow, that's a crazy price. Usually like $4 or $5. Now they're $30. And turkeys are the same. They're pushing $15 to $18 for a turkey chick. So, we're out here trying to create meat, but at the same time get those eggs for hatching, because the amount of money to, you're thinking about $120 a week. Think beyond the money though. I've come into this point now where eggs actually have value for me beyond the eating, because you can hatch them into something that's tradable for silver, for seed, for tools. So I'm looking at, my whole reality has been kind of restructured in the last 7 days or so of things produced out here provide and are giving you other things that other people have without having to use green paper to do it. It's opened my world here too. One of my neighbors is kind of sick, so the Amish, they rode their buggies up and they brought some tomatoes, and they're like, hey, we got some eggs over here. Like, yeah, we have eggs too. So we were comparing, the guinea eggs, and we got bantams and regular barred rocks. So we were comparing these 3 different types of eggs we have. And the Amish were like, whoa, those look healthy, good looking chickens. You got a nice little run there. You got that with a 5-star hotel for your chickens kind of thing. Like, these interactions just let me drop off the news radar so quickly that I'm struggling to get back into it with a YouTube channel up at Adapt 2030. I put this video up the other day, and it was last night. It took me 3 days to actually get it from, I already had the slides, to get it to record it and just, cut that in pieces and edit the audio and get all that together. Because there's other things to take care of. And dropping out is such a beautiful thing, because it's been sunny every day. Like I said, it's pretty dry down here, so the snakes are getting a little crazy. They're coming in on the chickens. Snakes are looking for the water. And all their natural habitat's been kind of drying out, like the river, or I wouldn't say riverbeds, but stream beds and kind of this thing. They're hungry for water right now. It hadn't rained here in like 2.5, 3 weeks. So hopefully this weekend it'll rain, because I wanted to transition into the fires in Canada. Because here's the whole thing is, just being out in nature is one of the most beautiful things ever. But nature can turn on you, just like it did with Ransom over there with the storms. Well, fire is a very dangerous thing too that can turn on you. So the way I'm looking at it here is, in Canada, California kind of let the cat out of the bag, where was a State Farm insurance, quote, I'm just going off memory, was a state farm that stopped insuring properties because of fire risk. Well, Canada now has wildfires from British Columbia all the way over to Nova Scotia. I mean, massive, like super crazy, unbelievable amounts of fires that all started like in the same day, same weeks. It's just insane how many fires kicked off in Canada in the forests. It's almost like, something from space shot down a laser beam and just lit forest on fire. Or if you want to believe in a terrestrial, the best thing, like the ground cracked open and lava oozed out and just set thousands of fires in the same day. But they're raging still. Smokes over New York City, the whole stories. There's smokes over Washington, D.C. now. You can't see, stay indoor. 100 million people under a smoke advisory, don't step out of your house. This is a crazy thing. And you see, when you talk about the alien stuff there, the smoke advisory here in the East Coast is 100 million people do not go outdoors. But see, wait, I'm working outside to build a barn, so I'm out in the air right now, and it is not like it they're reporting on the news. It is really not. They're giving you these yellows and the greens and the purples and all these dark blacks and all these things. And I'm sitting down here going, you know what? The air is as clean as it's always been, even here in East Tennessee. I've been outside for the last 5 straight days, 10 hours or 11 hours a day, building the rest of this barn and getting up and building some turkey roosts because they're getting bigger. Our turkeys are getting bigger. They need their own space. We're going to move them to a different caged area, or not fully caged, but just like 4-foot, 4x4 wrapped wire or, woven wire so we can get them in their own space. But the news is showing you something very different than I've been seeing out here live. They're showing you smoke advisories, stay indoors, East Tennessee. Wait a minute. The sky was blue today. What's going on here? I could understand if it was in New York and I saw the pictures in New York City and everything, orange, kind of Marsy landscape stuff, but they get that every single year from the dust storms off of North Africa going into Europe. You see it every year. They even had the last couple of years where the snow turned like brown or whatever, orange, because the dust storms blew in on top of the glaciers, which, by the way, was record snowfall for the last 2 years in Europe. So the snow should have totally melted by then, but they did these dust storms. It's a cycle. Dust storms come in the springtime. The wind patterns change as seasons change. You get these massive amounts of wind blowing, dust storms, but generally, over the last 20 years of global warming, the snow would have melted by then. But for the last 2 years, there's been a huge amount of extra snow cover, snowpacks still on the mountains, still in the ski resort areas. So when it blows in, of course, it lands on the snow, and then it's a story like, whoa, there's all this dust storm. But wait, the snow would have been melted before, but now you kind of got a cover for it. So what I'm thinking, it might be a little bit off base here. I kind of want to go woo-woo because I'm relaxing tonight, is that the fires were set on purpose in Canada. But whoever did it, whatever did it, doesn't really matter. They were set on purpose. Large scale, vast across all the provinces up there, from Pacific coast to Atlantic coast, all ignited at one time. Well, if you follow back to California, they're not insuring countryside homes or rural homes that are in a quote-unquote fire zone. Now, are they? Now, think about how many homes will not be insured after this. Now, they'll be paid out, of course, in deflated and hyperinflated Canadian dollars. Don't worry about that. They'll get the payout. But see, then think, like when you get paid out, how much less is your money worth by the time the payout comes? That's question A. And question B then is, will they reinsure your home in the same location in the countryside, in the forest? Nope. The answer is no. They're already talking about it in the news that they will not reinsure homes. So you know how it goes. Mortgage lenders aren't going to give you a note on your home if you're not going to insure it. Like they'll pull your mortgage. That's in the clause that you have to have your home insured. Now, whether there's a bank confiscation or some sort of, economic thingamajiggy, for a better term, that smoke and mirrors pull the strings over here. Regardless of that happening, people are talking about, well, they could call force majeure and make you refinance into an adjustable rate mortgage in some hyperinflation event. Okay, I get it. But And then I'll come back to that point. But in the clause inside your home, if you ever read your contract when you sign to buy a home, you have to have it insured. That's a default on your part, not having it insured. Right? The bank can default too, but you can default also, either not paying your mortgage or can I say it again? Not holding insurance on your property. That nullifies your mortgage. I hope you know that, everybody out there listening. If you cannot insure your home, your mortgage is null and void. So if the suddenly insurance companies like State Farm said, no, we can't insure your home, well, you're going to have to buy insurance somewhere. And super high risk fire insurance, what are you going to pay, $30,000 a year to insure your home? That's insane. They could price you out just by the insurance itself by charging you, half the price of your home to insure your home per year. But here's the important thing. I'm glad it came back to my memory banks here. If the bank pulls your note on a default in some kind of hyperinflationary event, and if they try to switch you into CBDCs, that is not the same as a US dollar. They defaulted and you get your house for free, but you need to push it. You need to understand that cutting of the gray hair. You agree to pay back your mortgage with US dollars. If they try to switch the system up and make you pay back in a new currency, they might call it a US dollar, but it's a central bank digital currency, digital issuance dollar, which is way different than what we have now. So please make a note of that, because as we move forward, that will happen. And if you understand the letter of the law, literally understand the letter of the law, then you shall get your house for free on the default. But 99.9% of the people will just go, oh, I got reassigned a mortgage, instead of fighting it in court. There are so many lawyers right now poised to jump on this as like a duck on a June bug, because they understand what's about to happen with the economy. Like, I cannot tell you how many attorneys are out there waiting for this, that the U.S. defaults, the U.S. dollar is no longer used in mortgage, and then it moves to the central bank digital currency. But see, they're going to take a line. They're going to take a huge percentage as well. They're going to be forever employed defending your cases in court. See, but only a few people are actually going to do that. So anyway, Ransom, I'm going to end there, because the smoke, the downgrading of the corn crop, by the way, if anybody's listening out there, your food's going to get really expensive, not because Ransom got blown both ways but see, this is happening in the Southern Hemisphere too. Now, what happened with Ransom is directional winds come in one day, a different direction, wipe out crops, hailstorms, sideline winds, but the next day they reverse across the entire hemisphere. What? How do you get winds that reverse themselves on a hemispheric flow? Well, the same thing's happening in the Southern Hemisphere right now. So the corn crop in America is one thing, and it's been downgraded because of drought. I'm talking massive downgrades. On good to excellent, they're coming into some of the lowest corn, what they consider coming in the future as what would be harvested. We're going back into the 1970s in terms of yields. But you got to realize how much smaller the world was in 1970, how many less people there were, how many less farms there were, how much less agribusiness there was in the 1970s. We're going to drop back to that. But at the same time, the wheat harvest, the hard red winter wheat, soft wheat, winter wheat, all that stuff's going to drop back to a 100-year low also. At the same time, the corn's pulling back. And we're considered in good standing in North America, because Ukraine's going to go offline permanently. You throw some nuclear stuff up there, the entire corn belt, wheat belt of Ukraine goes offline. And by the way, Ransom, the Oblast region in Russia will also go offline if that nuclear power plant fails. So now you took two major grow regions or grain growing regions offline permanently as we go into mega droughts in America that are reducing yields, and then Southern hemispheric flows are the actual wind from the direction that storms come from in America is generally from the West Coast to the East Coast. And that's just generally it. It goes from west to east. But it's flip-flopping like just what happened with you. So I don't know what's happening with our atmosphere, but something tweaky this way comes. And I hope you can respond to a few of those those points made there.
I think this is all we're really going to hear about this year is how humans destroyed the environment, and they're going to take this El Nino, cycle, like you were saying, from the fire. The whole thing is like part of the scam that they do. Like they're already pushing for people to put on their masks again in New York City, to protect yourself from the smoke from the wildfires. And I was trying to show everybody this right here. Forest fires, one every 3 minutes in 1937, burned 21. And remember, we had the Dust Bowl back then, too. You were talking about that, too. Burned 21 million acres. $20 million in losses in 1938, October 9th. That was a lot of losses that they had estimated from a fire every 3 minutes in 1937. And another thing, linking this to the alien stuff, you said you kind of wanted to go woo-woo, relax in here. I was playing the 911 tape while you were talking. So these people are talking about these big aliens or beings or people or whatever they were with shiny eyes in their backyard after what appeared to be on the dash cam of the police camera was what looked like a big meteorite to me, big blue. And what I think, and this is just my opinion, I think some people really tripped out because something fell out of the sky in their yard that was hot and bright, and it probably burned up even before it got there. There probably was some noise. So they added a little bit to the story. I'm not accusing them of nothing, but I'm just saying what a perfect opportunity to have. But anyway, you think about these fires. Is it lightning? Because, I brought up the fact that there is an increasing amount of lightning going on in the world right now. And this may have something to do with the collapse in the magnetic field and energetic particles coming in and the change of the whole magnetic system right now. Or maybe it's bolides. Maybe there's little impacts going on all over the place of little hot metallic things burning up over or right into a forest, starting forest fires. I mean, who knows? Or like in New Mexico, it could have been government officials trying to help you out, by starting fires and accidentally making them turn into giant forest fires. And then following the next year by blaming you that, it's climate change, which, by the way, they're blaming everything on climate change now. It was a 125 heat index in, I think it was Puerto Rico, or where was that? I forget. Anyway, of course, it's climate change, right? And they're going to, only certain people are talking about El Nino and that it's normal for the weathers to change and that this has to happen. Matter of fact, when I was in college, I did a paper on the collapse of the forests. And I didn't know at the time that most of the information I was getting was really biased from the green movement. But anyway, I did this paper on the forest of Southeast Asia and how some of the trees there only pollinate during off season of El Nino. In other words, it can El Nino for 3 or 4 years. None of the trees are going to pollinate during that time. Or maybe it might have been the other way around. But either way, it was dependent on the cycle. And they were talking about how all the forests were going to disappear because of disruption of, weather patterns, yada, yada, yada. Well, guess what? That did not happen. Really, only forests are in danger from people actually chopping them down to plant stuff or grow stuff like palm farms and things like that. El Nino, or the lack of El Nino didn't do what they were saying because the core blame in that was man-made climate change. And they're going to keep doing that now. And they're going to blame everything on it from fires to the normal weather that you get in a cyclical pattern. Like the storms here are not abnormal, considering that they are telling us this is going to be an El Nino year, right? Which means monsoon is going to be incredibly more powerful than it usually is, because you don't get much monsoon unless El Nino comes. It picks up all that rain and it brings it into the U.S. So there's going to be massive flooding events throughout the Southwest, the Mississippi Valley. The weather patterns are going to be very lively for the media to spin and say it's the worst ever it's ever been, even though, when you barely get into history just a little bit, you'll find out, there was hurricanes blowing into the Gulf of Mexico, pre-colonial and pre-Columbian times even, that brought sand from the Gulf of Mississippi all the way up into the upper Ohio Valley. And if you can imagine the kind of storms that would bring floodwaters and make the rivers go inland and all of everything to swell, we're talking about some big storms. And now they're telling you they're getting worse and blah, blah, blah. They're not really getting worse. And actually, if you look at the numbers, the number of storms may have increased, and they won't tell you that all of these functions of the storms, like the increasing amount of them versus the increasing power of them, or, like how much lightning is in a year, that these are all directly tied to natural cycles that have been going on forever. But they're going to double down, triple down, quadruple down on trying to blame the average human being for the cause of why all this is happening. And they're doing this so that they can retain all of the power and decision making about what happens with the food supply. They're going to say that we have to do this in order to feed people. We have to do this in order, for the greater good. And you remember just not too long ago, all of the people in the media and on the left were talking about how no one was coming for your gas-powered stoves and your gas hookups for your stove in your apartments and your houses. And then the very next year, they start trying to outlaw them in different states, cities, municipalities. So it's an attack on your living. It seems like, they're trying to get everybody prepared for not only the Stone Age transition. What I mean is like I don't know if they're going to call it the Neolithic age, shortly after technology, and then what are they going to call the enslavement age that follows that? But any of these dystopic things that they're doing all relies on this key factor of you believing that you're damaging the environment, and that all of the storms and different phenomenon that are about to happen that are natural in a cycle that have happened to Earth countless times that we don't even know, because they didn't know about some of the stuff. They did know about the stars, which tells me that on a grander scheme, they knew which times, and we've talked about this a lot, they kind of knew which phases through the zodiac would be more tumultuous, or, more stuff would be happening. They even told us to beware of this time. So I'm thinking that a bunch of really interesting things that human beings have not got to see in modern civilization period are about to start happening, including and not limited to impacts in different places, volcanic activity, extreme lightning events, and things like this. We may even get to the point where we get to see the crystalline rocks or the quartzite type of rocks and megalithic structures around the world actually spark up, depending on how small the magnetic field gets and how much interaction with cosmic and solar rays and magnetic fields that the Earth goes through. And then when you add in the placement of the planets, we're in for it. Maybe nothing will happen, but I have a feeling some very interesting things are going to happen that governments around the world are going to hijack your fears of, so that you continue to do nothing to be self-sufficient. Never prepare. Always be scared. Always depend on your authoritative sources for information and your government bodies to let you know where the aid's going to be, what you can and can't do, where you can and can't buy, what foods, and how much you're allowed to have for your family unit. Does that sound scary? Because that's exactly, literally what they're trying to do right now. You can find article after article where people are trying to implement taxes and other things that are based on nonsensical green movement ideas to make life so expensive. And that's another way they can attack people with hunger. Speaking of the gold and in the kind of economic ground, all they have to do is play with the monetary systems of the world's up and down, and that would cause complete chaos and hunger worldwide, because people would never have a stable currency or situation, and things will cost too much, where food gets dwindled down. And you can already see that happening in Europe right now. Meanwhile, they have people from other places causing drama all over the place. So it's like a complete nut house effect. And it goes back to what I've talked about many times. I think we're at the civilization point where everyone knows we're not going to leave the planet. There's really not much left to discover. And as a collective civilization, the governments are pushing people over the edge into this cabin fever scenario where they'll aid in their own demise.
Get back in the cabin, man. There's polar bears on the periphery. Got to keep the polar bears at bay. Oh, by the way, there's 30,000 polar bears now, but in 1970 there were 5,000. Canadian Ice Service polar bear survey. And by the way, they didn't even do the Arctic region, which is around Russia, because Russia would not give them permission to come and do a survey. So that's only half of the Arctic. Side note, I guess, on the call of that one there. But that's a real trippy idea I never thought about. The bolide is exploding with hot detritus or debris, whatever you want to use it as, that would come down and then spark those forest fires. Because if you go back to the Chicago fire, we're talking the 1800s, the Chicago fire. The old story says some kind of somebody's horse kicked over an oil lamp, and then it got a little out of control, and then it got way out of control in the city. Burned so heated that rock melted, even though they only had wood buildings at the time. So go figure. So rocks are melted all over the place, fascia on different rock structures, and what you'd consider World's Fair kind of columns, Greek columns, things that we see through architecture across every realm on our planet, melted because of wood buildings. Okay. But at the same time, if, people are focused on the Chicago fire, but in the periphery around Chicago, there was enormous amounts of other fires in Wisconsin, Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And a lot of people believe that the same thing. Either there was some kind of bolide that came in and sparked those fires, or something celestial happened where some sort of plasma bolt reached the Earth's surface. So to come from it on that direction there, how could the people who are aware of saying, whoa, all these fires started instantly within, minutes of themselves? Well, if that was a bolide inbound that broke into pieces on a ground strike, that would spark the fires. But then how was that used against us, this information? Because governments don't want to come across clean and tell you there's all these massive changes coming in on natural cycles to the point where we won't grow enough food. We're already at that point anyway. Why do you think the world's changed so much? We've actually rolled over that point back around 2020 where we couldn't grow enough food to feed the planet at the current 8 billion people. So we were digging into the reserve stocks every year from, say, late 2019, because after that harvest in 2019, really low on quite a few places across the planet where we didn't grow. If you look at just the general statistics of like grain productions of corn, wheat, sorghum, buckwheat, millet, amaranth, and those other side crops like spelt and things that a lot of people don't follow. Barley's a good one too. We didn't grow enough for the whole planet. So yeah, there's still a lot out there because it's in warehouses, it's stored up. They call it carryover stocks. If you don't, it's actually, there's a better, I was at a conference and somebody really explained it down to the T of it. The real name for, you could call it a carryover stock. Okay, we got this much left, we didn't use it, we'll just take it over to the next year. But if you term it stocks to use, it takes on a whole different variable of how much each industry needs, how much the human consumption is, what is for the animals. So if you're going to start knocking things down, you're going to go for the animals first because they chew up a predominantly large amount of, like the barley crop, the wheat crop, the corn silage, the corn crop. There's a huge amount of byproducts in the animal feed industry. But still, they're going to come down to it and they're going to consume. So think about COVID time for a moment here. If we go back to 2020, and again, I'd done a few videos back around that time, around 2020, 2021, because I knew we'd reached this rollover point, and so many others out there that follow this grand solar minimum cycles and how it bends civilization. How would you save food for the populace without alerting them that we're coming into a time when we can't grow enough food to feed the planet based on a natural cycle? That's a hard sell. Who's going to obey the rule of law? Who will keep going to work? Who will keep investing in your fake rigged markets? Very few would if they knew it was natural and recurring. And we're at the point of rollover now where every year forward, we're going to grow less and less food, but the population of the planet was going to increase, which meant everybody would get less. Okay. What are you going to cut first to save food in a population? We're talking about a global civilization here. You would probably shut all the restaurants down. You would for sure cut all the catering events, such as, what would that be? Conferences, convention centers, food and bev in hotels on, large company trips, cafeterias at universities and schools, which waste a huge amount of food. And redirect all that food into the family kitchen where you have to cook and save your leftovers. Does that sound like 2021, 2022 to you? With another excuse behind it? Sure does to me. Think about how the entire food chain was restructured during those years. Now we're coming into it again. It's going to drop from here. So what comes next? Obviously, it's going to have some sort of economic thing that explains the supply chain shutdowns. But the natural things can only be so much. You're going to have to come back to it. Corn is coming really low this year. So is wheat. And I did a whole bevy of videos talking about barley production getting whacked at the knees with rye, by the way, because of the ozone depletion event and the UVB striking the ground in the southern hemisphere. And this goes right into these reversing atmospheric flows, which Ransom, you experienced. I'm talking the whole southern hemisphere is experiencing this too. So think about the El Nino. El Nino is generally, just for any of you who are just the first time hearing about these two cycles, La Nina and El Nino, grain traders and commodities traders, this is a well-known thing since the 1800s. They trade on this. They call it the grandpa trade, by the way. If you're unfamiliar with it, it is so well established, so boring of a trade, so perfect that you can scrape 3 to 5% on your grains every single time. They call it the grandpa trade. That's how boring and how static it is, that if you're willing to sit through the flip from La Nina to El Nino, you can always scrape 3 to 5% on your investment every single time. Since the 1800s, that's how precise it is, where they know the thunderstorm patterns and the precipitation patterns change. Now, generally, in the Corn Belt, they're going to get it. Now, hopefully, I'm saying hopefully because I'm rooting for humanity here. Homo sapiens sapien, that's my team. That we get this shift from La Nina, which dries out the grain growing areas in America. That it turns to El Nino and it starts pounding a lot more thunderstorms, which I know equal fires in forest areas. But that thunderstorm generation, that convection that drives thunderstorm activity, increases like tenfold around our grain growing areas, specifically the Corn Belt of the United States, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, now contaminated. But if you really look at it in terms of the cycles, the rainfall is going to change. And for them to run with, we're coming into an El Nino, the ocean temperatures are the warmest ever. See, I'm also looking at this in a dual fashion, like what's making the oceans warm? We were in the third straight La Nina, and the only time that happened prior was in the 1800s, in 1899 into the 1901, 1902. If you look back in that chapter of history, right? I'm talking centennial changeover. Like, 1999 to the year 2000. Go back 100 years to 1899 to the year 1900. Bing, bing, bing. I would have been loved to enjoy some of those celebrations. Can you imagine if you had a time machine, you could drop back into like the year 1900 and party and December 31st, 1899. I want to join a party right then. How cool would that be? But they had a triple La Nina as well. Droughts in the United States, Central Corn Belt, all these things, Central Wheat Belt. But the water temperatures are going to increase. But the way they increase so quickly, it really baffles me. We have all this volcanic activity above ground where everybody's watching like 48, 52 volcanoes erupting in a single day, just nonstop for the last, weeks, month now? And there's a new study that came out and said they found 30,000 new underwater volcanoes that they've mapped recently. That was on the Watchers. The Watchers.news. If you like that type of content, the Watchers.news. They found 30,000 new underwater volcanoes over the last few years of mapping. So if we got 48 to 52 above ground volcanoes popping off, huge in some instances, what do you think is going on under the water where we can't see it? And all these stories of like methane volcanoes and mud volcanoes, and what was that one that's leaking some kind of tectonic fluid that's off the coast of Washington or Oregon? Like there's a huge, huge, huge amount of underwater volcanic activity occurring at the same time. Do you think heating oceans and underwater volcanic activity are correlated in any way, shape, or form? Do you think they're related? Let's say 10,000 underwater volcanoes are going off. Do you think that would heat oceans compared to like 3,000? Magnetic field disturbances, changes? I think it would. Now, remember, you have to explain away everything natural into something that's a human-made cause, because if people really catch on, they're just going to quit caring about the real world. They're going to focus on feeding their families. And that's talking about getting off traditional systems. They're not going to believe the grocery store is going to be stocked anymore. We better grow our own food because that grocery store might not be there. Now, if me and Ransom do it, we're two dudes talking on a Thursday night. But if 50 million or 100 million people in America do it and they get their victory gardens out, and if you think about 200 million Americans having their own gardens in their own homes, it wouldn't dent the bottom line of some conglomerate elsewhere pushing the poisons, pushing the glyphosate. I don't know. That, and then also the awareness of, it's a natural cycle. Not you, not me, it's not you, not CO2. It's the sun. Oh, and by the way, just a last thought here, Ransom. I wore that shirt around. We went up to Knoxville and I wore this shirt around. Not CO2, not you, the sun. And it's one of my merch products, but it's one of my favorite t-shirt. I had a couple people wave at me and go, yeah, right on, man. You get it. I had two people actually stop me and say something about the shirt. Then we went into Home Depot and there were a few people that were like, yeah, cool. But we went into the co-op, the farm co-op, and everybody just was like, all right, this guy gets it. But then I went into Trader Joe's and the looks on those people's faces, they didn't know what to do. Like there was nothing they could really say. It wasn't like, I hate Biden or something on a t-shirt, right? There was nothing political. It was like, it's the sun. It's not, and we're in an area where there's like national renewable energy labs and all these types of solar physicists and these, people developing all these green technologies, and you're off on a middle-level Wednesday. They don't know if you're like a scientist or what, and it just is so baffling to watch the faces of these people when they would read the t-shirt. A lot of people got it. But a lot of people were super offended, but they didn't know how to respond. It like broke the reality. I loved it. It like walks around. Next time, I'm going to do that. I'm going to actually put some sort of recording device on me because I'm out in public. I can record. By the way, know your rights for recording in public. That's another thing. Get your state statutes or your of what allow, or even Supreme Court rulings on what is allowed for recording in public, and have that printed out. So if anybody comes up, police arrive, whatever, you can't record this, you can't do that, you got to be in the store, you can't do this. No, I'm in public here. By the way, Kate versus US VUS shows that you can record in public. There's like a million things. Have it printed out, have it ready, go in with your cameras, enjoy the show. But that's what I'm going to do on next time. So anyway, Ransom, rambling too much. Take us into the break.
It's already break time. I was actually sitting here looking for that article that you sent me about the underwater volcano, because I found another one, and I guess I turned it off somehow. But I did find this thing. It's just mind-boggling. More than 19,000 undersea volcanoes discovered by the U.S. fleet going around doing sonar and by using satellite. And, we only really think about the ones that are above the ground. That's the only ones people worry about, right? Oh, no, this one went off, that one went off. But can you imagine? And by the way, you were asking, is that correlated? They always talk about Antarctica and how it's the ice sheets melting and stuff. And they never mention that the only place where that's happening is where we know that there is geothermal energy coming up from underneath the ice, and those places most likely several volcanoes. But can you imagine what kind of havoc the world would go in if just one of these volcanoes that are under the ocean just popped its top with some big force, like a big VEI number, and it just blew up? Imagine the amount of steam, tsunamis, etc. that would happen, and it would just be all off guard. Everybody in the world would be off guard because their eyes are always centered on the ones above ground as the danger. But think about that. 19,000 at least undersea volcanoes discovered. That puts the whole world in a whole new perspective. And I was showing everybody the kind of topographical image. But here's another one that shows all of the mounds picked up by satellite that we know, and they've detected more than 43,000 of them. 16,000 have been charted in detail by sonar from ships and submarines. But this kind of puts it in perspective that a great number of these mounds under here are volcanoes that are undiscovered. We don't know about. They're not charted. So a surprise could come at any time, not to mention what we were talking about, the bolides. Right? Any number of these could be surprising, and just because I mention this all the time, when you see these headlines about, this new asteroid just discovered, it passed by us 2 days ago. It was the closest it ever went, or something similar to that. They're always talking about these giant objects that are flying by the Earth, and almost always they didn't discover the object until it flew away. So these are just a number of big things that you really can't worry about because you can't do nothing about it unless you happen to know that you live by one and you prepare for it. Otherwise, if we could just get back to that neighborhood gardening like you were talking about, and just do that, everybody could have that security to know, what, no matter what happens around the world, at least we'll be all right here, unless you're at the center or the epicenter of one of these natural disasters, which, does happen all the time for people in the U.S. I remember earlier this year we were talking about the power going out, and right after that, you remember Florida got hammered, and all of those people were out, and they were, looking for where to go and all of that, and all of them probably should have or could have been much better prepared where they didn't have to depend on government entities for their salvation. Right? Because nobody's really going to come help you in the end except for you. So you have to be prepared. You have to know what's going on. And not only that, you have to be the breadwinner, as they used to say. That's something that I think everybody's forgot, is that term, the breadwinner. And it really was important. Who is really going to fill the bellies of your family? Who's going to fill your belly? That means you need a backup plan on, filling your belly, right?
Full bellies are
disasters.
good. Maybe we could eat seamount mud and try to fill our bellies. Mud cakes would be the best thing, I think. I don't know. There's so much going on now to distract you and explain away these things that intuitively humanity is feeling right now. Like, you can't really even walk anywhere, see anything, move around without feeling that something is definitely not right. And it doesn't have to be just the politics. It's the earth and the sun itself. We'll be right back. David DuByne, Ransom Godwin, mini Ice Age conversations. New seafloor map reveals thousands of seamounts. See you then.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
I've never realized a time that was more necessary to make sure you have a backup of food than there is right now. We see all of the food markets going expensive, every item. And some of these items that they offer in these kits are approximately $1.50 to $2 a meal or serving, which is quite a bit cheaper than anything that you're buying now. I'm really interested in the protein pack, because this is where, even if you're gardening and you're not going to have these proteins, but you can stack them back. And this thing has chicken, beef, eggs. So it has a lot of protein that maybe you could mix with the stuff that you're growing. I'm really thinking that this summer is going to be starting all of the hard times as far as it is for people with food. So I think this, beyond any other time that you've thought about buying storable foods, is probably the occasion to give yourself some insurance so that when hard times come and the trucks stop coming, you have a backup plan. At least you have nutrition to get you by. And some other people are not going to be doing that. They're going to be having difficulties and maybe even finding themselves in aggressive situations with hundreds of other people trying to get supplies that are no longer there. And these kits have everything. Fruit, you got the meat. It's all stuff that you're going to need to survive. The insurance that people need right now, I just don't think there's ever been a comparable time other than maybe when, we had soup kitchens in the 20s and right again in the 40s when things were becoming thin again. And we're in that time now. And when you start looking at world events, you can see that the food supply is going to be tied up with multiple different events around the globe. And you don't have to worry about those things if you have this taken care of. You can get 6 weeks, you can get months, depending on the size of your family. This is definitely insurance for survival, because other people are going to be fighting over the scraps that are left at the store, and you don't have to do that.
Yeah, you mentioned something there, the seeds as well, to be able to grow some of your own food in addition to having stored foods. But when it goes down, it is going to go down, and things that you think about it right this second. Everybody's talking about buying gold and silver as a way to hedge against inflation or be able to have something to be able to pay your property taxes in the future. With the devaluation of the currency, well, it will be the exact same thing. Now, do you have enough money to buy an ounce of silver? Perhaps you do. It's the same thing with food preps. The 1 week kit compared to something like a full 6 weeks kit or a 12-week kit. Even if you get just one small minimal thing to add to your stack. I talk to people who prep all the time. It's always about tools, storable foods, water filtration, and a way for you able to store water and filter it at the same time. Because if you can get that closed loop enough, there's always going to be somebody that will help you garden with those seeds. Heirloom seeds is where you want to go. Heirloom open pollinator seeds. Because at the end of the day, when you collect those seeds at the end of your season for growing, you want to be able to store those and then have them so you can replant next year. I think that supply chains are going to start constricting even further. I mean, look at the way that the world laid out. These really incredibly complex supply chains are now starting to fracture in the middle of everywhere. Political strife. We didn't even talk about the ozone depletion event that's going to wipe out food production further in the Southern Hemisphere. The tipping point. Humanity's here. We're seeing it everywhere. So how do you protect your friends and family? Because you got to think everybody has survived. We would not be here having this conversation if people had not survived the last 8,000 or 10,000 years of events that were far greater than what we're going to experience. It just takes a little prepping, a little bit readiness, and I do believe that we'll be able to get through this.
when we're talking about these seeds and the storable foods to go with it, you're going to have to probably invest in both of these ideas. When you go through the list of the seeds that they give you, these heirloom seeds, they're the best type of food that you could possibly get or grow yourself. But you have this backup of the food storage that lasts 25 years.
And that's heavensharvest.com. Use the code ADAPT at checkout. That's ADAPT. Take 15% off your order.
Whatever comes your way, weather, war, whatever it is, you're prepared, you have security. At least you know that your belly's going to be full so that you can continue on the work that needs to be done to stabilize everyone's life around you.
Second hour right here, Mini Ice Age Conversations. David DuByne with Ransom Godwin taking you through hour number 2. Try and get deep into the underwater seamounts, understanding the changes that are going on above ground, below the sea. How's it going to be presented to you to gain more control over our lives? Like, these taxes are ridiculous. Global taxes, what are they going to do? Nothing. I saw there was an aggregate tax. I did this thing. The last video I was doing was talking about the UK is pushing all these new global initiative taxes. So they're trying to implement it all at the same time. So like 5 different taxes: or carbon trading tax, there's a plastics tax, there's a food tax now where they want to tax your food on the carbon footprint it is during production based on nitrogen fertilizers. And I'm like, wait, whoa, what? It was all a CO2. How'd you switch to nitrogen in the last 6 minutes? These types of things. Like, is that really going to do anything by charging you more for your food? No. But there's something called an aggregate tax, which I've never heard of this before. It's new for me. Aggregates. So what they want to do is for every ton of sand, they wanted to add $3 to the price because you're going to use a machine to mine the sand or crush rock or anything involved in construction, right? But then what's this whole thing about the green movement? Oh, all this new construction that's going to be used. Do you think the base of a windmill is just stuck in the ground and then they tamp the dirt around it and we're good with that? Or do you think it requires concrete and aggregates and gravel and sand and this sort of thing in the build out of everything? Yep. And right on time, there's a global tax. There's a new tax, aggregate tax, $3 a ton. Now, who gets to control that money? It was 47.5 billion pounds, not dollars, pounds, because we're in England, last year. So 47.5 billion pounds was stolen out of people's pockets. There's nothing they can do to change the environment. Nothing. Are you kidding me? The sun and the earth and our systems, or what are they going to go up 30,000 feet and redirect a cloud? Really? I mean, geoengineering projects are something different to speak about, but just a bit absurd. And Revolution Radio, thank you for letting us speak about this, because a lot of platforms don't. I'm trying to keep it within the family-friendly, for our advertisers on YouTube, family-friendly program. We're not stepping out of the bounds. We're just talking about fluffy white clouds in the sky. It's family-friendly. For Revolution Radio, we can let it go here. So Ransom, bringing us back to just before we dropped off the break, was talking about those underwater volcanoes. What if there was perhaps a VEI-8 underwater? Then what would happen? Because we know above ground a VEI-8 means a reduced population of 90% in about a year or 2 maximum. Ground, they'd be blocking every sunlight, and the ground would be affected with ash, and just, animals couldn't forage. I've seen some crazy stuff happening over, where was that Fuego volcano, in the periphery there after some major eruptions. Even the fish farms were affected, where there was so much ash coming down in the fish farms that, all the fish couldn't breathe in the water. And then the animals outside that couldn't graze on the grass either, and they all ended up starving because they couldn't graze. So, talking about the natural effects here, one thing, and thank you for staying with us, those of you who listened to hour number 1, but those of you just joining us for hour number 2, welcome. I want to start, not financial advice. Can I say it again? Not financial advice, but a little birdie whispered to me yesterday and says, David, you need to look at the U.S. Treasury cash balance. And by the way, look at May and June of 2022 when they did the exact same thing they're going to do this month and next month. And I said, well, that piques my interest. I like cycles. And that was only 2 years ago, 2.5, 2023, 3 years. Excuse my math is bad. I can't even subtract 2020 from 2023. You see what kind of week I'm having? Anyway, U.S. Treasury added $1 trillion between May and June of 2020. COVID, 0% interest rates. We need to flood and give all the stimulus checks and whatever. It didn't make it. Who cares about the reason? Just $1 trillion was added in from the Treasury on their cash balance sheet. And that's irregardless of cause or reason, doesn't matter. And the price of silver at that point went from $12 up to $28, which is a $16 difference. Bitcoin also crashed at that time. It had reached its high somewhere around 64,000, and then it crashed down to 16,000 during that same time. So here we come again, like between now and the middle of July, between this, what is it, June 8th on this program here, by the time we reach, let's say, July 20th or July 25th somewhere, they will have added another $1 trillion onto their cash balance sheet, the Treasury. So if we look at any indication in the past, which may happen in the future, it means that using that same $16 difference from $12 to $28, which occurred in May and June of 2020, if people are going to flee to safety, perhaps we're going to get another $16 rise in silver, and that would take us to $42. But just as the media is going to run with, oh, it's a hothouse planet, global warming, even though we're running into El Nino, and the headlines talking about, oh, we're just, the planet is so hot, it is just incredible, it's a furnace, blowtorch. Yeah, they're going to use all these crazy headlines. So how's it going to be on the financial side of headlines? Because when silver starts to run above 40, oh my, it's going to be the same exact thing, but just in the financial news. So I'm wondering, question, what's the premium going to be on that? Because right now you can't touch an ounce of silver for under $30. Even if you buy a 10-ounce bar, it's still, you're looking at $30 per ounce, even though it's like 26-ish. You're looking at premiums between $4, $5, $6, and then if you're looking at Liberties or whatever, it's still $48 today to buy a Liberty, which is ridiculous. Like you're living in America, the spot price is $26, but you can't touch one for under 40, 42, 48. Unbelievable. So the spot price on American minted silver coinage is a $20 premium. So if it runs up to $42, what do you think the premium would be? And then you're missing out, the boat's left, hyperinflation, you listen to silver, da, da, da. Watch it. It's going to be within the next 45 days. And then also Bitcoin should crash. Again, it's not financial advice. I'm just saying U.S. Treasury is going to do the same thing they did in May and June of 2020. Possible repeat. I mean, it's super simple to look at these charts everywhere across anywhere that has silver pricing, Bitcoin pricing, U.S. Treasury balances. Let me see. Had this chart up the other day. Who was it? Oh, St. Louis Fed has these live charts or Treasury deposits, Federal Reserve Bank balances, and you can spin those charts up yourself from the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System in the U.S. Bitcoin, they're looking at around $5,000 crash to Bitcoin to 5K, but then immediately what's going to happen is, supposedly, now I can't see in the future that far, or I don't know what's going to happen exactly, but the way it was just given to me was like, check out this cycle. We're going into another $1 trillion. At the end of that, they had to go back to quantitative easing. And when I say that, they had to go back, cut the interest rates, and run back. So if that were to happen, then you would see a new super high in Bitcoin after that point, and you'll watch the price of silver drop again. But it's not going to be like a single day thing. We're talking over months and years of movement here. But the immediacy of the next 45 days in terms of what looks like a repeating cycle, the Fed refills itself and liquidity drops at that point. A lot of people are out there. Corporations, for example, they have, quotas to meet, and there are only certain investment grade securities, et cetera, that they can touch. They're going to jump on this new offering because they're going to get 5% in 30 days. Of course, they're going to drop their money in there. That's a no-brainer. Where else are they going to park their money? Well, if everything else is collapsing, the NASDAQ's going to collapse. I'm just saying, not financial advice, just based on the last cycle, May, June 2020, exact same repeat, NASDAQ collapsed at the same time following Bitcoin collapsing. So if that were to happen, where do you park your money for a safe haven is the question. You run to gold and silver. So my long call here, and if me and Ransom are talking, or myself, if I'm talking anything that might be legitimate over the next 45 days, which would only be, 6 shows from now, price of silver should be above $40 and Bitcoin should be sub 10,000. So anyway, that's the way I'm rephrased in the beginning hour here, Ransom. Thanks for sticking with me, hour 2. And everybody else out there listening, thank you for sticking with us, live streaming. You can check us out, libertylinks.io/solar minimum to find all of our live streams tonight. Again, that's Liberty Links, like Liberty dollars, and then links, like a link that you would link out to, links, plural, /solar minimum. Anyway, Ransom, thanks for joining me. Welcome back. And what do you think about the Treasury cash balance idea? Valid, or am I off base on that? What do you think?
No, I think that's anybody that recognizes these cycles, obviously in different fields, whether you're watching weather or economics. My dad would sit around and look at, stocks going up and down, and he realized that there were a bunch of patterns like that. And he started trying to get into that. He did notice, a lot of these companies, depending on who they announce is going to be, we're allowed to talk about this now, by the way, if you didn't know. YouTube updated their serve community guidelines or whatever. You're allowed to talk about the idea that maybe 81 million people didn't actually vote for a specific person, which is pretty bizarre. But I think the reason they did that is because, we're having an upcoming election off in the distance there, and they want to make sure if it doesn't go the way they want it to, that they are allowed to do that and have videos that don't get banned and stuff like that. But that's kind of irrelevant. I digress. But these cycles, like when you catch them, they always have this obvious thing, and when you see them in retrospect, you're like, oh man, why didn't I, do something then? But you could tell that gold specifically has always been the money for the entire world. So if you could get a solid idea on a pattern of the ups and downs of gold, I guarantee you that if you just followed that cycle, you would gain wealth. I mean, it's kind of obvious. And, you ask that question, where do people put their money that's safe, that doesn't depend on all these other factors of markets and instability here and there and everywhere? That's always been the same answer: silver, gold. It's the metals. Like, just think about gold per se, not being a money person or specialist or anything. Just a simple idea of gold itself is this metal that's like indestructible, right? It's indestructible, basically. You could break it down to its molecules, but it's still going to be gold. You can't burn it. You can't corrode it. You can't really do anything to it. So it's the perfect money, right? So it's like a no-brainer that when they start playing with markets, if you've already backed up, your ideas of the list of what you need. So my number one is food. I want to make sure everybody can eat no matter what happens. Well, once you got that taken care of, you start worrying about, it's not going to be the end of the world no matter what happens. There's always going to be some kind of financial market or trading or bartering or something. I need to invest in something that legitimately secures a small amount of wealth or a large amount of wealth if you can protect it. And the only way to really do that is by these kind of precious metals and things. And everybody that I've ever talked to, including my grandparents, they invested in gold and they used the ups and downs on the gold to have money. And my grandpa was like a engineer that worked in the Air Force, and then he retired and he did civil service. But the main income source that they had was investments into things like this, and they were pretty savvy about it. And they didn't have much money, but the money that they did put in, it grew over the years. And one of the main things that they did invest in was gold. So every time they lost a lot of investments in 2008, they got kind of cleaned out from the other types of investments they were making because the market got so volatile, but they didn't lose money on gold. At least if they did, it was only temporarily. You can always count on that. And that's just like, I have a drawer full of silver, and, I know I'm not going to go spend that or use it for money. And the money value of it is obviously not that much. They're just dollars and dimes. However, I can melt it down and make a block of silver and go down and trade it with anybody that does real business. That's just a fact. There's those guys that collect all of the old jewelry and stuff from people at the pawn shops. And I remember I mentioned this. I read several articles talking about the increase in the amount of destruction of items through the pawn shop. So they're not playing with trying to resell jewelry and things like that, unless it's just a good place where people like to buy bling bling at the pawn shop. Other than that, they're just melting it down in the back. They're just melting it all down. They're making bars out of it. They're sending it off. They're getting their money, or they're stacking it somewhere. But you kind of have to admit that it's kind of bizarre that we've gone so far from a gold and silver system, considering those facts, that it's always been a money and it always will be. Now, whether or not the government will come after you, like they have before, where they tried to say, well, it's illegal to keep it at your house, or you can't do this. You're going to have to get this little piece of paper that says that you have money. And that's, if you remember, not too long ago, I think it was at the beginning or right before the Trump got in, that all of those people got robbed, basically, because they had bought paper that said that they had gold, but then when they tried to get the gold, they didn't actually have the gold. So there's nothing better than actually having the gold yourself. Now, if you get too much of it, obviously, that's just one more thing that you have to protect. But that is actually number 2 on my list. So after you got the food situated, obviously you're going to have to situate security, and part of that is having self-defense, and what you're going to do in the long run, not just the short run, is when it has to that. So you have to plan out logistics. If you have to move, you have to have logistics to trade if anything actually fails. Because we talk a lot about a scenario that's just horrible, like that everything's collapsed. Well, unfortunately, that's not the only thing that can wipe people out. Small emergencies, little things happen to certain people, and a lot of people know that we're investing. They got their investments wiped out, whether it was from Enron or in 2008, whenever it was. Picking the wrong thing to invest in can assure that a straight, quick route to the poorhouse, and not having any investments at all. So you can't really argue that is not a winning strategy, because if it wasn't, then all of the richest people on the planet wouldn't stockpile gold, and that's exactly what they do, including when you think of the royal family, they have a state secret of how much gold they've plundered from around the world. God knows how much they have hidden. The Vatican, the U.S. government, you can go on and on. I'm sure China has giant rooms full of gold. That is, unless they have all paid rent to the real controllers or landowners of the planet to get woo-woo there. What do you think about this story coming out of Las Vegas? So it's only like 24 hours old now, so a lot of people are going to be talking about it. So in my opinion, like I said, I think it was just a bolide. I mean, not a bolide, like a meteorite. It went down. It caused a big ruckus, some sound, a lot of light, and you could tell that it had some probably iron or nickel and stuff like that in it, because it's burning real hot blue and green. But what about this idea if they really did like legitimize the idea, like they have been doing with some of these so-called military videos, like the TikTok and or not TikTok, excuse me, the Tic Tac video, and they have all these other videos that they're now saying, hey, we don't know what it is. And I think that's part of the reason that they changed the whole term from UFO to UAP, because, a UFO has already been thought of an unidentified flying object, an actual object. And what they're trying to say is, well, maybe it's not an object. Maybe it's just a phenomenon. And we just so happen to be working on a lot of technologies that can create phenomenon that you can see up in the sky. So, when you start thinking about all of this, how can they control the narrative? You were asking that earlier. How does, what if people do find out these things are coming in and starting fires or coming in and increase? They can just use it what they always use, never let an emergency or a catastrophe go to waste, and they'll use it for some kind of propaganda. I mean, think about it. You were talking about that earlier, what would they have to do to really shrink up the food markets? They would start having to make, people clothes. And they already did a practice round of that in 2020 and 2021, where they convinced the whole world, to dress the same, putting diapers on areas of their body that it didn't belong on. And they convinced all those people to stay at home. They even convinced people to go, and sometimes more than convincing, as in China, and in Australia, which everybody thought was a super free country. But then to see them chasing down people and making them go to centers, and what's funny is, you remember that article from a week ago or a couple of weeks ago where they were talking about in Brazil, they were hooking people up with these new little utopic villages, where they all squeeze together in the middle of the jungle where they're not utilizing the jungle around them, no yards, no nothing. That's just a bunch of squeezed buildings. That's exactly what they practiced people with supposedly worrying about if they were going to be sick or spreading sickness or whatever. They put them in little camps just like that. Isn't that weird? In China, it was pretty obvious that they were forcing mass amounts of people to go to these locations. But places like Australia, New Zealand, they were really getting weird. And you notice, not to be a conspiracy theory, but that just followed years of gun grabbing and gun laws. And it seems like that they just have this, it's like a AA program for alcoholics. It's a 12-step program to complete tyranny. Let's see, what do we do? A, let's, make up some rules. B, let's tell everybody they have to stay home. C, let's give them an ID that they have to go everywhere with. And then, the police or the health police or whoever it is can stop them and ask for their papers, please. The same old thing. And then here in the United States, I was just reading this article about a woman who had tuberculosis and stayed home. And because she didn't want to go to get treated, they sent the full force of the government, because they were totally worried about getting this disease from her, that they sent a bunch of armed military type people over to their house to get them and arrest them and force them into isolation, because they did not listen to the government when the government said, you're sick and you need to do what we have to say. And I think that we're going to get a round two of that, because how often do you do a beta program and then not put out the real program later? Just a thought there. The gold and stuff seems obvious that and we've been saying that since last year. It's really what Obama said, the greatest transformation of wealth ever. And they've been doing that. It's been ongoing for the last 20 years. And we're getting to the plateau of it, where they have control of just about everything.
It is one giant lion walking up behind you, and then it gives you a kiss. Ha ha. Yeah, right. I want to go back to the gold for a second here. You ever watch that movie, The Deep? That was way back in the 1970s, scuba diving movie, where they found a treasure ship on top of a munitions ship in the Caribbean, scuba diving. But I remember that one point where they brought up the gold and the beautiful necklace, crazy thing from the 1600s, Spanish, made for the queen. And he says to him, "Oh yeah, I know you would melt this down in a second, because the ocean doesn't give you sales receipts. So if you have a bar of gold, you have a bar of gold. If you have a piece of jewelry that's from the 1600s, that's a relic that could have been stolen from a museum. Could have been." So think about From the 1600s until present, how much jewelry has been melted down? Possessions of kings and queens refound in shipwrecks that has been melted because it could be traced and then reclaimed. You know, a bar of silver, a bar of gold. Again, that's so true. There's no sales receipts from the ocean. But somebody would certainly ask you the question if you popped up with a 400-year-old necklace with emeralds and diamonds or I should say emeralds and rubies in it. Where'd you get that thing from? That's worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. Or you say, well, I can't really sell it. I might get in trouble. It's going to melt that thing down, get a bar of gold out of it, and that's good enough. But this, you know, something that you'd ask the question, like, what do you think about this Las Vegas sighting of quote unquote glowing eyes? Well, I have a story or maybe even an answer for you. The frequency and the vibration of the space around us, the literal frequency of resonance, magnetic resonance from the sun is changing to the point now where it's affecting human visual spectrum. Now think about it for a second. Now we're all very familiar with Roy G. Biv. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Rather, there's a spectrum of light wavelength that you can see with your eyes, and it starts at red, and it goes to orange, and it goes to yellow, and it's super cleanly defined, Roy G. Biv. Now think of on a visual spectrum of things that have been hidden from us for thousands of years because our frequency has not been in tune with other realms that are here around us at all times. It's like doing mushrooms. I mean, once you step into that doorway there, it's always been there. It's not like it just opened up because you ate it. It is an always there part of reality that could be accessed. It's always there. It's part of it. It's not just because you ingested a mushroom that it's suddenly this thing just popped out. No, that is part of the physical waking reality that is invisible to most, except for certain periods of time after ingesting certain substances. So think about this. What if our visual spectrum is changing to the point where instead of Roy G. Biv, like the red that we're going to see, the first thing visually spectrum-wise that everybody's going to see are these 10-foot tall, glowing-eyed alien beings. And that's the first thing that we see visually spectrum-wise in a change. Instead of seeing the color red, you're going to see a 10-foot tall, glowed-eyed being. And then orange will be a 4-foot tall, green, oblong head being with a long tail. And yellow would be Jabba the Hutt. And you could go down, in terms of different beings that would be seen based on visual spectrum changes, on frequency changes from the sun, and effects on our magnetic field on the planet, and the way our hemispheres, the lobes of our brains, react to stimulus input, or the way that we perceive reality and we see things. The veil is being lifted, and it's really just a frequency change. So would that make sense to you, Ransom? That we're going to start to see things that can't be explained. Well, that's just part of the thing that we're seeing with the environment now, where, the entire hemisphere is bending back and forth on itself with UVB radiation striking into as we come into wintertime in the southern hemisphere. I mean, there's a lot of things at play right now, but how would you explain away to people seeing beings? Now, would you really come clean and tell them, by the way, it's this huge cycle, and every time we change an age and we're coming into the Aquarius water bearer, which, by the way, 6,000 years ago they warned us about. Remember that one? Beware the water bearer? Oh, yeah, that was the cycle that had been mapped out over the last, say, 5 million years of every time we come into this region of space, every 6,000 years. So there's been 1,000 of these cycles that we've mapped out. We totally know when it comes in, frequency of the sun changes, and da-da-da-da. Are they going to come clean on the television and tell you that? Of course not. Of course. Are you kidding me? Not. But how would you explain it away? Well, you would say the same thing. Oh, there's aliens that just popped out of a craft, shot in from the sky or whatever in a blue halo of light, first ET sightings, and then suddenly everybody starts to see them. or were they always here and just our visual acuity changed and suddenly they pop into view? And that's the explanation versus telling everybody the magnetic field's changing and you're going to start to see crazy stuff. I don't know, Ransom. That's my explanation.
Well, it makes sense that every so often something like this happens, or we wouldn't have so many stories in the past about descriptions of things, all the way from plasma petroglyph type idea to, the pantheon of 12 gods and some of the characteristics that they give them that seemingly were supernatural. And it is weird. Think about this. What if, what if there were an alien species that lived on another planet, and that planet didn't have the same type of magnetic field that we do? Maybe none at all, really. And, that would mean that if they were ever to visit another world, like Earth per se, they might have only a window to do that whenever the magnetic field collapsed, or maybe they were used to certain levels of radiation that they wouldn't get if they visited us. But you can kind of think about that. But we know that magnetic fields affect the way that people think, and not only that, we've developed our whole civilization now, the modern tech, as creating these magnetic fields around us. And I've talked many times about how companies slip in equipment into the consumer electronics that they give us, and it's been proven that they do that over and over, from eavesdropping, spying, cameras, monitors, all the way over to the game systems being part of a massive worldwide server from that company, using everybody's game systems as a server to work on problems with AI. And they don't ever tell you what they're using all this computing power for. So it's real easy to think that if you did go into a phase where the magnetic field change caused people to be more susceptible to ideas or, other things, or literally they could see things that they wouldn't normally see as an effect of it. Maybe it's not really there, or maybe you just get into a different phase where you are seeing things that are there, and normally you wouldn't see that because they're blocked out of our spectrum completely. But either way, you would know that the people here would find some way to co-opt this, parameters of this phenomenon. So you would see that, they could easily manipulate the masses. And say everybody's getting excited about this thing in Las Vegas, mainly because the police caught something on the camera, and they went and investigated it as if it might be something because they had themselves seen something in the sky. Now, what I looked at and what I showed there looked most likely like a meteorite coming in that had a lot of metal in it or whatever. But then you kind of switch over to these ideas of where our civilization is going. And here's an article right here. New AI tool can quickly create better and stronger medications for you. So look at this whole idea of giving over more of your medical information and medical needs to our artificial intelligence. And here's one. Scientists zap sleeping humans' brains with electricity to improve their memory. Now, this has nothing to do with that other article, but keep in mind that a lot of people use their devices, like these watches that keep track of their heartbeat, and the Fitbits and MP3 players, phones, and all this stuff people use and also connect directly into an interface that they plug into their body, like the headsets and different things. And we're wanting to skip past that into an actual microchip, and they're making it in impressing the idea of it to mass quantities of people, that their life will be so much easier if they just take the implant. And, we kind of called that, even though they were talking about all of the pigs and monkeys and chimpanzees that got messed up from testing, trying to put a chip in their head. They finally successfully did that. And they got I think it was a chimp or a monkey, whatever it was, to play Pog on the thing, and they're all excited about that. So just that, they're going to skip to having a direct connection. And at that point, it doesn't matter what you see with your own eyes, because everything is now manipulated by this. So even if you saw it with your own eyes after being connected to devices, because think about this, we have phones that censor in real time and put the moon there because you can't get the moon in a picture right. So they, instead of putting a camera that can actually zoom in their phone, they just rigged it where if you look at the moon and you focus it in, it'll just put an AI image. Well, if you think that's the only thing that's going on in the perception realm of the electronic field, you're wrong. They're doing that with television broadcasts. They're doing that with the streaming. They're doing that with the actual monitors that you use. There's flicker rate, all of these other things. So it's obvious that they can manipulate these devices that create their own electromagnetic fields, each one of them, your computer, your TV, your phone, all of it. Not to mention pounding out microwaves and other things that have been proven to affect different aspects of the human. So we have direct, you can beam in messages right to people's brains. And when you combine that with all of the technology that's come out, and I've brought it up many times, we have computers that know how you're feeling. We have programs and devices that could see into your mind and pull out an image. There's devices that could look into your mind and write out a real-time text of what you're thinking, what words you are thinking of. So we're at a completely vulnerable, manipulatable phase at the same time as all of these AIs are coming out, and at the same time as these natural cycles and plateaus of problems with our civilization, like the monetary system and the way that we ship food around the world with the just-in-time system, where at any time it can be completely disrupted and shut off. They have this backup plan for the reset to completely control people. And here's an article for an example. AI scientists are developing a digital brain that will surpass humans. And it gets into how it's exponential, the field of AI and quantum computing, machine learning, and et cetera, the digital brain that can outthink humans. So just think about that just for a second. If there's any kind of problems, any kind of narrative they want to push, if they literally want to change the emotions of everybody, say someone got the order from the top to broadcast specific colors and tones through all of your media that made you feel sad. And then you combine that with the machines that can beam right in and make you feel like, you have to go to the bathroom or you're nervous. All of these machines exist. And if you think that they're not using them against you, you're naive. So we're in a completely vulnerable, manipulatable point in human evolution. And the only way out of it is for people to retract, opt out, and go back to the natural system. Because, if you really study the way that fungus, bacteria, viruses, and plant life and animal life all work together, it itself is a network, an internet of information being shared back and forth. And it's really odd and strange that we've put all of our efforts into the non-natural, unhuman, anti-life sciences more than we pushed into these other scientists that seem to be the actual realm in which we live in, is the biological, organic realm. And, when you get into farming or just gardening or even house plants, you start to feel that connection. And I think there's a big thing with this, that there's a way for us to back out of this false reality. And I don't know how much you're into grounding, but that just by itself seems like something that we should be doing. And then think about this. If the whole electromagnetic field of the earth is changing, and it's been a decade or two since your feet has touched the ground, you're completely, totally out of vibe, out of frequency, and out of whack from the natural human experience that you're probably supposed to be having. Because you got to keep in mind, for millions of years, most likely, human beings were walking around a good portion of the time with their bare feet, interacting with nature at a more like a macro level, where the people lived in nature. They weren't just manipulating nature. So you could take like the Sand people of South Africa, for an example. They live outside always. They have, trinkets and jewelry that's over 10,000 years old that has been handed down to them. They're some of the oldest group of people that we know we're at. And all of that time throughout history, when the rest of nations were falling and collapsing and starving and warring and all of that stuff, they just been out there in nature doing their thing all this whole time, just living. They track down animals. They know every plant. They know every drop of water, where it's going to be, how to find it. If you wanted a specific animal, you could tell them. I want to see a cheetah, and they'd walk around in the desert for 5 minutes, look at the tracks, and tell you in a few hours exactly where it's at and show it to you. We know nothing about that world. We're barely, people like us that are getting back into farming and trying to utilize the earth. We're barely at the verge of what some of the prehistoric people and archaic humans understood when they lived in nature. And somehow we have to find a balance with new technologies and new tyrannies and this connection to the earth that we're going to be living on, because no matter what they say, they are not the answer. You're going to have to find a way to adapt and survive on the earth with the earth as a symbiotic organism. And don't worry about the bird flu. I don't know. Did we lose signal? Are you muted?
I am muted. Thanks for bringing me back to the earth. Hello, planet Earth. I wanted to stay on the subject of Earth because I'm on Telegram and I was looking at the Conspiracy Hole channel. What biblical authors meant by the word Earth. And I'm just going to read it for you, and everybody can sit back, and I'm just going to read the gingerly story. What did the biblical authors intend to communicate when they used the word earth? Question. Good question. Genesis 1 is an ancient cosmology that uses specific words and images to describe the ordered world as understood by ancients. When we study chapter and talking about Genesis, we can discover how the writers of that time era of the Bible understood the structure of the world and the origins. So we're going to take it back to the Hebrew language. The word for earth typically means land rather than a globe or a floating sphere in space. And there's also a name for rakia, which is a solid dome above the land that holds back the waters above. The creation of the rakia creates a place where life can flourish. I think they were talking about pre-flood times with some sort of atmosphere that was different than ours. Some sort of, I wouldn't say dome in terms of like flat earth. People believe there's a dome and rockets bounce off of the dome. It was something else that was like a firmament of some sort of water vapor. And the Earth's tilt was a bit different as well. It was more vertical, so they didn't have the seasons as we have now, where from North Pole to South Pole, everything was just one season. It stayed, the Earth there was no tilt to it. It was perfectly what you consider an up and down sphere versus the tilt that we have right now off of the ecliptic. But what about this theological claim that life can flourish and the actual use of the word earth is only the word for land? It changes completely everything you would understand. The earth. What's your first thought? The earth. Oh, that blue marble that NASA took in a corner of a window from a rocket ship, supposedly that they lost the plans for to build in the 1960s to go to the moon, but we can't replicate the technology. That little marble earth, yeah, that earth. That's exactly what you think about. All computer generated, CGI, it's always the same picture of the earth. It's always the same picture. How many times have you seen again and again and again of, over the last 30, 50 years when it's always the same image. Like, can they not put another higher satellite up or get a rocket out of orbit to go up there and take a better picture? I don't think so. But how does that change the context of humankind? If we just substitute that one word for earth and we do away with the sphere that you understand, but turn it into land, mountains, what you're walking on under your feet, land in terms of a country, a continent. Because up to this point, when you say the earth, everybody instantly snaps into that picture of the blue earth, visible with the oceans, not of land. So when you talk about different kind of common law, etc., that changes everything. And if I might add one point here, I was also earlier doing a little bit of research on the megalithic walls and dolmens in Montana. So, Ransom, you do a lot of traveling and looking at petroglyphs and the canyons and things. I wonder if you've been up to Sage
something
Wall.
That I've been looking for.
Because I'm looking at this over. This is in Montana. Now, what I'm looking at is Machu Picchu, basically, but in Montana. Artificially constructed man-made walls with a different kind of. You can't slide a piece of paper. You can't slide a knife between. And when they flash back and forth between Machu Picchu and these walls, they look exactly the same. It's just that the Montana looks like it had been scraped by a few glaciers. It's smaller. It definitely looked like it's a little more weathered. Definitely looked like some ice rolled over that thing. So we're talking, 18, 20,000, 40,000 years ago, whatever it would be. Sage Wall. Check that one out. Montana. So, Ransom, you ever been up there? I'm just curious.
No, I'm actually, I was looking at it right now, and it does kind of look like a wall. There's a lot of those places, and it makes you wonder if that's where humans learned how to do that in the first place. They're like, look, this is solid. This has been here for a couple million years. Maybe we should do it just like this. I mean, because that's kind of what we were talking about, learning from the earth, how to do things. Let me see here. I was going to play this guy's video just for a couple seconds, but you can see this overhead view of this wall, and I have to admit, it really does look artificial. It looks like a man-made wall to me. I mean, I know that geologically that can happen, though, on layers, but if you kind of look at it, it looks so close to something like in Cusco or something like that. Yeah, that's pretty trippy. I was kind of thinking about this whole idea of how these cycles really affect everybody, and they don't realize it. And, I was studying into octopuses last week and the Cambrian explosion and all of that. And they're proposing, there's a new paper out. Well, it's not really that new, but anyway, they're proposing that something happened around the time in these waters where cosmogenic material or extraterrestrial RNA or DNA rained down on the planet. And it's funny because we know at the same time, a lot of the same things that we're tripping on now were happening. The ice sheets were melting off, a lot of new material in the ocean, the oxygen levels were going up, things like this. There's all these other reasons why it might have happened. But when they start looking at the cell lines of octopus, they go back and probably, I don't know, I think about 270 million years ago or so, and something just changes, right? And their line of animals, where you get now today, octopus have like 33,000 gene proteins that human beings don't even have. So none of the other animals on the planet have this either. But the whole idea that the entire world, the whole earth, the whole bubble, sphere, dome, whatever you believe in, anyway, at some time there was stuff floating down from the heavens, i.e. bolides and, things like that were landing in a mostly ocean planet, just mixing around in there, and we know from studies and on tardigrades, which is another weird animal that just shows up in the fossil record, just boom, there it is. It's a multi-celled creature. It has no ancestors that we know of. It's just there. Another one. And it seems like periodically, speaking of cycles, that stuff just bombards the earth and we get a new injection of biological information. So with the octopus, it seems like, all of these animals were going around simple, and then all of a sudden there was this introduction of maybe a viral agent or something like that changed the octopus in a whole nother direction of evolution. And they think that, seriously, that this is from cosmogenic material just raining down on the earth, either us moving through some kind of cloud where it slowly soft landed, or a more hard landing with bolides, meteorites, and etc., which puts us in this idea. It's weird that there's all of these facets and influences that change the way life works on Earth. And obviously we're going into a cycle like this, so who knows what happens to it. And that might be the reason that the elites want to control the genome so much. If you really realize the effort that they put into these different programs, genes is one of their number one things. And I know a lot of people that study this know that this studying happened in the 40s first. I know that they say that they discovered the gene later, but they already had some idea of that the workings of life was in the blood. And you can look into almost any ancient people, and they had this idea that the blood was something important. And I think what it is lost knowledge misinterpreted. And now we're back to that lost knowledge, and we're finding evidence. So what do you think about the idea that we're just in another portion of the cycle where we're getting a bunch of different influences, and it's possible that the elite know that there may be a genetic change due to either magnetic field difference, cosmic rays. I mean, you take your pick, but also the fact that there may be cosmogenic RNA or DNA soft landing and intermixing with the biological zone that we have on the earth here, changing it, because we can tell that whatever happened in the Cambrian explosion just changed everything. Now, whether it was all the animals dealing with a new predator or new genes and they had to react to that, and that's what sparked super evolution, or just the fact that there was new genetic material. And then when you think about that, the possibility of that happening on multiple occasions in the past, maybe, the Avalon explosion or the Cambrian explosion, or even a number of different events. Think about what that would do now, and the fact that all of these people that are in these fields that are discovering this knowledge now can tinker with it themselves. So they can co-opt this just like anything else. And in fact, they have been, because, that's exactly what we're talking about, is the introduction of new mRNA in the ancient past that changed the way life lived on Earth, just totally. So if you know that term, memory RNA, the viruses that give that, not to mention the new technologies we're not allowed to talk about, but just the viruses that do that, they leave a genetic component on everybody. And we know that specifically in humans, with blood types and other things, with antigens and proteins, that at different times in our past, we've been attacked by various different viruses, and a genetic change has happened since then. Now, knowing that, do you really want human beings with this same knowledge and actual expertise on what does what, tinkering with your code, and realize that they are doing it without your permission? Which brings me to the idea of this new avian flu epidemic that they're warning everyone about, and talking about, the answer to this is to mass vaccinate the rest of our food, to keep them safe from this avian flu, because we don't want that avian flu there, because that's bad, because it's went around before, So that's another layer of things to make you scared about, is where are we going to get our chicken nuggets when we're evolving? You have to grow them yourself. The answer is we're getting to that point where it's like a weird world where, like on the road, where the guy was eating bugs whenever he found them, because they were organic, and the only other thing to eat were humans. So we're not in that position yet, but we are in a position where you can steadily see the choices in the food market shrinking down to only choices owned and created outside of the natural world by engineers with information that they've gathered out of our world. And now they're hinting at the idea, it's not that big a deal. We might have had a meteorite or something that just soft landed on the earth and dropped out already full octopus eggs 270 million years ago, because that's what they're proposing, that either actual eggs of another entity landed on Earth, or that some kind of biological soft landing of viruses and things just changed the entire cell line of certain animals from then on. And if it's true that it happened to octopuses, we can get back into that Anunnaki story of other people editing genetics to create a human being that they wanted to use, and then reflect that in today's time period, where I ask you, is that not exactly happening via corporations and governments?
All three of the above. You asked me that question. Would it be magnetic field changes? Yes. Would it be cosmic bombardment from a huge amount of bolides? Yes. Would it be cosmic rays with a decreasing magnetic field on the sun? Yes, because there'd be a decreased magnetic field on the planet, which would our shields are down. It's going to be all three. I just want to know how to avoid becoming an octopus in the next bombardment of space debris in 2025. If you already knew, the gene sequence and how you were planning for the changes of magnetic field shifts, cosmic rays, and bolides bringing a bunch of new genetic material into land in the oceans 2025, you would kind of front run that, would you not? You would place markers or whatever so you'd know the changes that would occur, provided you knew the prior cycles. So what if you could stop yourself from becoming an octopus by pre-inoculating your mRNA or your DNA itself? Knowing that the octopus transition would be inbound, but you could do something to stop that. Or enhance it to be an octopus with 16 tentacle legs. Either way, you stop the transition or you bring it all gas, no brakes. We'll see you next week. Ransom Godwin, DuByne signing off. Studio 8.
Thank you for listening.